You're listening to a Comics XF podcast.
X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we rank every story. And I mean, brother, every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I, of course, am the bad boy of X-Men podcasting, Zach. Hi.
Hey, Zach, how we doing?
I've been thinking.
Oh, okay. Thoughts? Here we go. Bring them on.
Perchance, have we been doing this podcast for too long? Because I don't think anyone should ever have to read 1,000 X-Men stories.
Zach, we are hitting a landmark today. We are ranking our 1,000th X-Men story. I was planning on doing the math on like how many actual issues of comics this was, or maybe an estimate on how many pages. That sounds like a bad time. And I decided I don't like doing math, so I didn't do that. I'll leave that up to some other,
I'm going to rough out and say
nerd.
Somewhere between 300 or 3,500 and 5,000 individual issues of comics.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we do is arcs, so that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, like if you average 3 to 5 issues, we're probably around there. Plenty of one-shots involved in there. But again, hey, even if we only read one issue, 1,000 comics is arguably too many for one story.
Hey, there's two of us. We've had a lot of guests. It's been, over 7 years. But I am excited for this episode because you and we labored long and hard to try and figure out what the heck we were going to do for this momentous occasion. And I like what we came up with, which is
some of us didn't like the idea of us ranking comics that Adam has made and letting him have to judge himself. Some of us thought that was uncomfortable, and I don't want to do that, and I just won't record, Zach.
Well, yeah, that idea was floated by both you and Dr. Anna Papard, and I said I don't know if that's ethical. Ethical.
This is Adam. I just want to be clear. The ethics of an X-Men podcast are like, don't actively harm someone.
That's a good rule.
And I think that's about it. Like, try not to passively harm people if you can avoid it.
Well, I like what we landed on because we did have a couple of really weird ideas, but this is a good one. Most episodes we do some time traveling. We go through a variety of different eras of comics that are connected by like a character or a theme.
Sometimes by plot relevant time traveling,
even that, right? But this episode, we are going to time travel to relevant dates that have something to do with this podcast. And so what are we starting with, Zach? We're going to go back in time to what?
So I think it's beautiful. I think it's truly, truly beautiful that going back, we decided, hey, let's really look back and let's see, well, what inspired us? Like, we've spent countless, and you could count them, but a good number of hours dedicated to the craft of this podcast, to the franchise of Marvel's, Disney's The X-Men. What possessed us in that moment, all those years ago, 999 stories ago, to say, no, this is what we want to do? And Adam, we decided to look the week that our first ever episode went up. What came out that week? And buddy, you know what it is?
It's some Mark Goog's X-Men Gold. That's what it is.
So what I want people to understand, this is not a slight on anyone. I do not want it to be perceived as a slight on anyone.
No.
But I can tell you from experience, it was very easy to be a excited fan of the X-Men in 2019, 2020 during the Krakoa era and like putting all of your energy into creating something new and cool about X-Men and really wanting to get into it. There were a huge number of folks who started podcasts or websites or dumb Twitter accounts and all this stuff because of the level of excitement they had. And I truly love it. But to understand me and Adam, you have to understand that we were there when X-Men Gold number 9 came out. We said, this is a good idea. And this is what we want to spend our time doing.
That's accurate. You know, we looked at the exciting corner art of X's with characters popping out of the one side, and we said, you know, now is the time. Now is the time that we need to jump in with X-Men Blue and X-Men Gold.
Folks, if you want to see how honest we're being about this, look at our actual podcast key art, and you can see that the X from the X-Men Gold logo is in the background. Like that
sure
corner
is.
Box is right there. Corner boxes are what we had to be excited about in 2017 during the resurrection. You have to know, no matter how much history repeats itself, you've been there before, and you know what? The world keeps on spinning regardless.
That's right. For as bad as any X-Men era could be, present or past, there's always been another lull, you know, like these things come in waves. Sometimes they're really great. Sometimes they're not so great. Zach, before we talk about X-Men Gold number 9, we probably do need to thank the people that have been with us since X-Men Gold volume 2, number 9. And that is our lovely patrons on our Patreon.
You know, I was about to say that none of them had been, but that's not true. That's objectively not true, because
some of them carried over, right?
Because if people want to know the true history, if you're coming in 5 years ago and weren't there at the genesis of this spun out of what I was doing with the website Xavier Files, which at the time was just me doing truly atrocious, I refuse to look back and read them again, blog entries about different X-Men characters. And I've got to be honest, they weren't very well researched. They were kind of off the dome. And you can see that because I don't talk about the years 1994 to 1999 all that much.
Fair.
So
understandable.
So there's a Patreon for that, and it carried over. And I haven't done the math, and I don't want to go look, but I am sure that some folks carried over with that. In fact, I know that there's some folks who have been carrying that torch since day one, and I appreciate all of those people who have jumped in and been supportive of the show throughout all of the years in whatever iteration, form, weird side project we were doing at the time. Thank you so much for your support.
Yeah, and if even though this episode is not, you know, handcrafted around a patron's request, most of our episodes are. So if you've got $5, head on over to patreon.com/Battle of the Atom, chip in, you know, your money, and we'll get an episode going for you.
We'll get an episode going for you. It's not that big of a deal. We'll do it.
But this one's for us. This is for all of you, but it's also for us to go back in time and look at this amazing issue of X-Men Gold number 9, which is written by Mark Guggenheim, penciled by and inked by Ken Lashley. Boy, I hope you enjoyed Kitty Goes to Washington Part 1, which does not have a Part 2.
This is almost like this is almost a prelude to the next arc, but the next arc is only 2 issues. And I want to be clear. The next arc of this comic is about bringing Omega Red back from the dead. Now, folks, you have to understand, they had already done that. They had the Omega gang or whatever, the Omega clan from Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force. And there was already an Omega Red. We did not need another Omega Red. And that was only the 3rd time Mark Guggenheim had done that in 10 issues. It's like, let's make another one. Another one. Another one. Oh man, Marky. This is I don't even man, this is so hard to talk about this weird comic where hey, Stevie Hunter is a congresswoman now for no conceivable reason whatsoever.
Well, for plot reasons, because Kitty is going to Washington to testify before Congress because there is something called the Mutant Deportation Act, which, given current events, it's not super fun reading about this particular thing in this issue. However,
to be fair, they were
Yeah.
also current events at the time. We took about a 4-year pause from
what's
current
crazy.
events.
Yes.
And even then, we didn't pause the current events in so much as we were more respectful about how we talked about the current events, and we still did most of the same actions anyway.
Yeah.
But that's getting way into the weeds. But it brings up, like, I bring it up, like, the uncomfortable political part of it, because, like, this is such a first Trump term comic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it very much is trying to say that testifying before Congress could actually mean something, that it could actually do something. However, I will say that this idea that she is going to go testify before Congress, and of course, as happens when superheroes go testify before Congress, inevitably a supervillain will attack. This happens in lots of superhero comics. In this case, Whiplash of all characters decides to attack our heroes. This is sort of what I would describe as sort of the Magneto defense, right? Like this is the Magneto X-Men 200 defense where, oh, he saved us. He's pardoned. And in this case, it does not work. Kitty does save them with Colossus. He saves the congressmen that are, being attacked as part of this Whiplash attack. However, they do not accomplish their goal, and the Deportation Act does still pass. So maybe it's more timely and apt than we realize.
Well, I would say that except for that later in this run, like this is just building up to the X-Men prove that they can be a model minority, and then the Mutant Deportation Act doesn't get passed. Yes. So that's one thing. Hey, you want to know something absolutely buck wild? You know how I was just complaining about how Mark Guggenheim created or resurrected Whiplash or resurrected Omega Red, the whippy Russian guy?
Yep.
You know that Mark Guggenheim also created this version of Whiplash?
Oh, well, that's that. Okay, great. So this isn't normal Whiplash. This is like green hair Whiplash.
Well, okay. So my understanding, and I'm not an Iron Man reader per se, but like classic Whiplash, the Whiplash that had existed in the past.
Yeah, Mickey Rourke.
No, that's a different one. That Whiplash wasn't Russian, but and he was just a guy with a whip, and he fought Iron Man.
Yep.
But then Iron Man 2, the movie came out, and they had Mickey Rourke in it, and they were like, well, he's kind of a mix of Crimson Dynamo and Whiplash, so we're going to make him that. And then they made a Whiplash that was like him in the comics. Hey, no one's ever cared about Whiplash as a character, ever.
No, when he shows up here, I'm like, that sucks. Get him out of here.
Of all of the cool, whippy Russians in this comic book, he's number 2, and he's the main villain. That's rough.
It's very unfortunate that it's
also
Whiplash.
weird that this version of Whiplash like showed up in Marvel key art as like all of their biggest villains for so long before they finally had other villains in movies that they could use.
I don't know. It's not very exciting. The real thrust here is that Googs is really determined to get Kitty and Peter back together. Now, the issue begins...
Wait. Before we get to that, can we say one more political thing?
Sure. It's our show. We can do whatever we want.
When we say this is such a 2000, like a first Trump term comic, it does have a page where Kitty Pryde rips an American flag off the wall and runs at it to try and beat Whiplash with the American flag, which is a very punch more Nazis kind of approach to life that like...
Cool.
we really thought that checks and balances would save us.
There is a certain naivete to what it is that we're seeing here. Similar to the naivete of trying to put these two characters back together. Now the issue begins with Kitty just kind of being like, ugh, God, Peter's like in my old room. This is weird. I don't know what to do with this guy,
Hey,
but
Peter, it is a little weird that you're in her old room.
it is. She needs
You've
muscle.
had time. You could have moved rooms.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
I'm sure there's multiple, but the way that Mark sets this up is that Kitty, like, I guess just invites Colossus along as muscle, and like we go from them being uncomfortable around each other to like we go from 0 to 100 in like one page
Real quick.
like
Real
it goes
quick.
from like, hey, it's weird that we're eating dinner together to like, well, if you want to be in my life, I guess we should probably get married. And it's like, what?
Literally what happens is Kitty is talking about how I just feel like it would be going backwards for both of us. And she says, it's not moving forward unless we get married. And you're so close, Mark. Because here's the thing. I don't have any issue with Kitty and Peter as a couple. Like, yeah, the age stuff in the 80s is a little weird, but also we're kind of past that. And also, it's not the least realistic thing to happen both in the 80s and ever. So,
Sure.
like, also, it's a story, so no one's actually getting hurt here. Which is why I can forgive it. But like, I'm interested in them being a couple if there is a story, if there is some sort of thing that you are doing with these characters, a journey you are taking them on, and that journey is not, well, we dated in the past, let's get married.
Yeah.
That's not a journey. That's a
No.
destination.
No, this does not even qualify as like good fanfic because there is no motivation for either the characters to be interested in each other, to reconnect. There is no substance to their conversations. And like, what's wild about this is that Mark obviously thought that there was enough here to really sell it for the wedding that comes in X-Men 30 until he was talked out of it at the retreat. So it's kind of crazy because by not doing the wedding, by having Kitty walk away in 30, right, as Donny Cates suggested, it actually makes it work better because this is very poor romance writing.
Right. It is retroactively, I agree. Like it makes sense. But that's because it was such a poorly written thing that what you get as a reader is like, it doesn't make sense for these two to be together, right? Like they're giving us no reason to. And the problem is that wasn't the plot, that was just bad writing.
Yeah, and what's even weirder is at least Kitty and Peter have a history that Mark can draw on, even though he's not. The absolute weirdest part of this issue, and one of the weirdest things from this run, continues to be Nightcrawler and Prestige being a thing. This makes
And yet
no sense to me. I don't like it. The conversation similarly is poorly written.
Does it make more or less sense than her last boyfriend, John Sublime, the bacteria that wanted to destroy all of the Earth and all mutants?
I think the problem is that no one knows what to do with Rachel. And Mark
No one's ever known what to do with Rachel.
Well,
Claremont didn't know what to do with her.
Alan Davis seemed to know.
They figured that part out. But even then, no, because Alan Davis writes her out.
Yes.
Wait, or does she? No, she gets lost in the time stream between
yeah.
runs,
Yeah.
I think.
Anyway.
If I don't remember the details, it's because they aren't on the page.
It's okay. Especially Guggenheim has no idea what to do with this character, is renaming her, turning her into something that she's not, has never been historically. And these characters who, seem more, like just old friends are like suddenly being forced into this romantic encounter. And there's no real reason for it. There's no build up to it. It's like, I don't know. One time we kissed an Excalibur, so I guess we'll follow up on that. Sure.
Also,
You
they
know?
didn't kiss in Excalibur. They kissed in Claremont's Uncanny X-Men.
Well, you could tell Mark that. So
I will tell Mark that.
all around, this just is a mess. This highlights really, like, there are strengths to X-Men Gold, you know. We've said nice things about other parts of this book, but this highlights the worst parts of the book, which are trying to establish these romantic relationships that he can't write. They don't work. And Ken Lashley's not doing anybody any favors with the artwork here.
Ken Lashley is doing worse than I expect from him. Part
Ken
of that
Lashley
may
can be very talented. This is extremely sketchy because he's obviously on a time, you know.
Well, if you recall, Adam,
Yes.
this book was double shipping,
Oh,
and it was supposed to
right.
have a rotating shift of 3 artists.
Yes.
Adrian
However,
Seoff, who did anti-Semitism,
Yep.
RB Silva,
Mhm.
and Ken Lashley.
Yep.
What I think happened on this is Lashley had to do an extra issue to fill in for that gap.
Yep.
Because he's on the stuff before it, and then they bring in Lan Medina for 10.
Right.
But I don't want to put too much pain on Lashley because I know that he's a better artist than this. And like there's pages like the last splash page where it's like, and Omega Red's resurrected, by the way. That page looks good. That looks like a Ken Lashley page. But the talking heads do not.
No. So this is okay. By that I mean it's
fine.
bad. It's actually bad.
Here's what it reminds me of. It
Mhm.
reminds me of it because this is what it was. At the time that X-Men Gold was coming out, if you had access to my Twitter and everything hadn't been deleted for years, you could go back and see that I was really fighting to convince people that there's some value and there's some good in X-Men Gold. And that's because I was the kind of person that wanted to start an X-Men podcast at that time. And folks, I've got to tell you, just echoes of some of the arguments that I hear from people about other books that are coming out that I think are bad and that they think are good. Sometimes you're just really trying to sell it to yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to take a look at our big old list now, Zach, because it is time to really celebrate that 1000th story being ranked on this list.
That's right, Adam. We do have a big old list. 999 X-Men stories ranked on this list right now. And I think we should give the whole say of the list from like top to bottom. You ready? So it's House of X, Powers of 10, Dark Phoenix Saga, Demon Bear, Days of Future Past, God Loves Man Kills, It's Guardian Wars, Wolverine. I'm not doing this.
I was going to say, you're not really going to do that, right?
I kind of wanted you to try and stop me was the bit, but you didn't.
Well, you stopped before you even got to like the 5th story. So I knew it was a bit.
I was on 6.
If you got to like 126, I'd be like, oh boy, we're going to be here for a while.
What, you think I would be that dedicated to a bit?
Could be. I don't know.
That's fair enough. Best stories, House of X, Powers of 10. We're going to go by 300s now.
Mm-hmm.
Kitty Pryde and Wolverine is at 300. At 600 is Psylocke. At 900 is Wolverine 159 to 161, the best there is.
Mm-hmm.
And 999, the worst X-Men story of all time, is 2099 World of Tomorrow. Okay, where do we have X-Men Gold comics?
All right, so we actually have some X-Men Gold up in the 300s, including the Negative Zone.
Cracked out things that we've done.
The Negative Zone War is at 334. We have X-Men Gold.
Above X-Men Gold 30. Adam, if we ever do a re-ranking, I may put Negative Zone War and Madripoor Nights like as a what were we on those days?
Listen, maybe we'll do that in a future episode. X-Men Gold 30 is at 343, and way down at 955 we have the first 3 issues of X-Men Gold. I would say we're somewhere in the middle between X-Men Gold 30 and X-Men Gold 1 to 3. I think it's better than X-Men Gold 1 to 3, but
it is better than X-Men Gold 1 to 3.
Yeah.
It's not substantially. Hey, at 809, X-Men Blue 10 to 12, Toil and Trouble.
Mm-hmm.
My gut says this is worse than Toil and Trouble.
I would agree.
Like, I'm not trying to... At 828 is the Secret Empire arc of X-Men Blue.
This is worse. Is this better or worse than X-Men Green at 837? I would say
what
yes.
you will about X-Men Green. X-Men Green is like trying to do something.
Yeah.
It trips and fails and chokes itself on like one of those ring things for pop cans. But it is trying really hard to do something.
I think this is better than 868 Gambit and Bishop Sons of the Atom.
Yes, that is accurate. However, I don't know if this is better than X-Men they hit in year 6 and 7 where they find out that Storm met the X-Men already.
It's funny because I thought you were going to compare this to Days of Future Past Doomsday, another Guggenheim monster.
Days of Future Past Doomsday is better than this.
It is
Days of
better
Future
than
Past
this.
Doomsday, again, insane. I don't know what he got in Holly Weird that's got Guggenheim all, toked up for that one.
All right, so this leaves at 867 X-Men Volume 2, 100 to 102 Revolutions. Is this better or worse than that, Zach?
It's worse than Revolutions.
All right, so this is our 868 / 1000th story
Entry.
we ranked. X-Men
It is ranked
Gold.
868. It's the 1000th story we ever ranked.
Wow.
Everybody, you need to understand, if you go back and listen to episode 1 of this podcast, that's where we were at.
Mm-hmm.
Put yourself in our mental state. That's where Adam and I were all those many years ago.
Oh my gosh. Hello. Dr.
Folks.
Anna is here. She has presented me with 2 shiny balloons. Hi.
Hi, Anna.
And let's party.
What's this? This one says you're special, and this one says let's party.
Yo, you're so special.
Oh, we're so special.
Yeah.
Zach, we're so special. We hit 1,000.
We're so special.
Congratulations.
Anna came in. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Anna came in with balloons. I was not expecting that.
That was great.
This is amazing.
That was great. Oh my goodness.
They're gonna probably make noise throughout the recording.
That's okay.
They're gonna make you feel special.
Oh, thank you. See, we're special. Absolutely amazing. So that's our 1000th episode. I mean, our 1000th story. That's our episode. Thanks everybody for listening. And Zach, you want to just? Oh,
We have more. We do.
We're
three.
doing.
We do 3.
Oh,
1,000's just not divisible by 3 evenly. It's really frustrating.
All right, we do have 2 more stories, and when we were trying to think of what other landmarks we could do, Zach was like, "Well, let's do our birth years, and let's try and do one that's like around our birthdays." That worked out a little better for you, but we both picked comics that came out the years we were born. So, Zach, what did you select for your birth year?
In June of 1991, what you have to understand is that we've talked about all of the X-Men comics.
Yes.
It turns out, popular time. X-Force had just started. Kings of Pain was going on. The Muir Island saga was finishing up. Let's see, what else was going on? A little thing called Weapon X.
Amazing.
There was another Wolverine story, which we had. I don't know if we've covered that or not. I forget, but I didn't want to talk about it. Oh, shoot. We could have done the Excalibur one that's all in rhymes and made ourselves mad.
Well, this might
Because
also make us mad.
This one has succeeded in making me mad, but we've gone through. Oh, Ford showed up in Deathlock that year or that month. We could have done a random issue of Deathlock. Instead, what I went with is what I think is a beautiful thing for us to talk about. It is Alf 44. Alf's excellent adventure featuring the uncanned X-Melman.
That's right. If listeners are not familiar with 80s Muppet sensation, well, he's not a Muppet. Puppet
He's
sensation.
not a Muppet. Muppets are a very specific thing.
Yeah. Puppet sensation, Alf. ALF stands for Alien Life Form. He's basically a little hairy pig-like creature that
Weird
fell
little
to
freak.
to Earth from Melmac, his planet that I researched this afternoon, was destroyed either by a fishing boat accident, all of the toilets flushing at the same time, or a nuclear holocaust. So there's some options there, but he basically ends up living with a suburban white family, and that's the gist of the show. So there's a very long running Marvel comic starring Alf that I guess people read, and this is written by
50
Michael.
issues, Adam.
Yeah. And
a 50-issue Alf comic that lasted significantly longer than the Alf TV show.
yeah, I do want to point out that if our Comics XF editor-in-chief Dan Grote is listening, he, I think, was suspecting that we were going to cover Alf's annual crossover tie-in to the Evolutionary War, which I know he hunted down in back issues. But sorry, Dan, we had to make it more of an X-Men crossover. So.
I don't know why Dan would ever think that I wanted to talk about the High Evolutionary.
It's
never wanted to talk about the High Evolutionary.
No, I think Dan is just fascinated by the idea that Alf would cross over with the Evolutionary War. I think he just liked that as a bit. So this issue is written
That's not a bit, though. That is, just to be clear, Alf did cross over with Evolutionary War.
Yeah. So 44 is written by Mike Gallagher, penciled by Dave Maddock, and inked by none other than Marie Severin. Interesting.
You know who edits this one, buddy?
Who's that?
Oh, it is Fibid Nisieza.
Oh, right. Yeah, Fabes. Yep.
Fabes is the editor on this, and boy, here's what I'll say. One, what I learned, here's what I know about Alf.
Yeah.
Eats cats.
Yes, cats are a core, very common meal on Melmac.
I know nothing else about Alf. I was very astutely, as you can tell, born after his show was canceled, so I do not know anything about Alf. I know it's this weird 80s thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I have learned is that the Marvel Alf comic has multiple X-Men parody issues.
Yes. And this is the issue that reveals the entire lineup of the Uncanned X-Mel Men, including, should we go through the entire lineup?
We have to.
So we're first introduced to Dark Kleenex.
Yeah.
Zach, can I just, before I read the rest of these, when I was a kid, I had a thing that I would do in my sketchbooks where I would often draw characters from Marvel Comics as animals, like probably inspired by Spider-Ham or something like that. And I would often come up with like stupid pun names for them. I had never read this comic book as a kid, but I distinctly remember drawing kind of like a dog version of Colossus and naming him Molasses, which is what I guess his name is here. Molasses. Anyway.
Yeah. Listen, this is
what I'm saying is there's a possibility that 11-year-old me like somehow wrote this comic book, and adult me is reading it back and going, this comic book is convincing me that maybe puns are bad, actually.
This is so we're going to get to the rest of the X-Men pun names. In fact, let's go through that, and then I want to bring up something related to it.
Yeah.
You have Psych Major, who is Cyclops, Hagen Dazzler, which is Dazzler, Nightcaller, which is Nightcrawler, but his power is that he can make phones appear
and call anyone.
So dumb. Professor Xylophone. You have Magneto, which would be a funny name if it was a better comic.
He does control giant slabs of meat that he throws at the X-Men.
Yes. And again, if it was a better comic, the idea Magneto should be Magneto's gay porn name, I think.
Sure. Maybe it has been. Who knows?
Hey, you also have Michigan Wolverine, which is one as an Ohio State fan and a proud Buckeye. Really upsetting to have this guy talk about Michigan football on my podcast on this special day.
Yeah, that said, the Michigan Wolverine is the best pun of these characters because it's not Wolverine. It's just like an Alf dressed as a Michigan Wolverine football player who just talks about Michigan Wolverine football.
He talks about Bo Schembechler way more than I was expecting in this comic.
That's pretty funny. Like, I'll give it to him.
I think it would be funnier if it wasn't the first most obvious thing in that, like, Wolverine, the comics character, his colors are blue and gold because those maize and blue are the University of Michigan colors. Like that's going back to the inspiration originally, and I think that's weird. And also, I'm biased. I had the displeasure of watching with 120,000 of my closest friends the worst loss in the history of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry in Columbus last year. So I'm very sore about this, and no amount of national championships are going to make that better. Also, they have Brogue, who is not a good joke, but the cover of Rogue sitting there reading Ulysses by James Joyce is very good. That's the best joke in the entire thing.
Oh, and instead of Emma Frost, it is Emma Defrost, which
that's just dumb. So nothing.
Yeah.
So especially in 1991 and around this time, there was a lot of pun-based X-Men parodies like X-Farce, which is an X-Force parody that Eclipse Comics did. Or a few years before this, the one-shot parody issue of X-Men, pronounced Zmen, one syllable, by Milky Way Graphics, which I would argue no one should read these. Also, What the from Marvel, was doing exactly these same jokes. None of them are good. None of them are funny. None of them are what you want them to be. They are just, let's do a pun here.
We also have to add, because nothing really happens in this comic. Alf encounters the uncanned X-Melmen, and they go and fight Magneto, and they come back. That's about it. It's not
because Alf is a superhero, the Fantastic Fur.
Yes, he's the Fantastic Fur. But when we say puns, I think most people might assume that some of the puns might be similar to like these alternate X-Men names where you're just finding a similar word. I think it's really important to note that 99% of the puns in Alf are puns involving the word of the name of Alf's home planet, Melmac. So they're not funny. It's just putting Mel in front of things. Like, instead of the Hellfire Club, they're the Melfire Club. And this happened so many times over the course of this issue that I was like, there is no Alf fan that loves Alf this much. Can anything possibly exist that they are like loving the humor of this comic book? It boggles the mind.
Now, what? Yes. So I was thinking about this a lot. They're called comic books, right?
Yes.
Why ain't they funny?
Hey,
the real reason for that is there's plenty of really funny comics out there. Like, making jokes with pictures is not a lost art form.
Yeah.
It is not something that the direct market appreciates and understands and goes with. And you can tell that because, like, I'm going to say the three funniest guys in comics today are Kyle Starks, Ryan North, Chip Zdarsky. Like, they write the best humor, period. And you know what? Those three ain't doing humor books anymore. They're doing serious books about grown men in their underwear being very serious and doing serious things. Because no one bought the funny stuff. No one liked the funny stuff. So they said,
the funny stuff.
I like the funny stuff too. I've been on that Kyle Starks train. He was on this podcast years before any of you chuckleheads were reading Peacemaker Tries Hard. Listen, I've been there. I know. I was reading dinosaur comics when I was a young lad. I was excited for Ryan North's Squirrel Girl because Ryan North was doing it. But that book barely made back its money in single issues. It made money on other stuff, and now Squirrel Girl is like an ongoing Marvel Rivals concern. Like, blah, blah, blah. Good job, Ryan. But, like, he's doing the Doctor Doom takes over the world book. No, let the funny people do funny books. Let Chip Zdarsky write a silly, funny book about silly, funny people and not Batman.
I like that you chose this book, and actually you didn't quite choose it because it's based on when you came into this world.
Yeah, I had very little say in that matter.
We don't really have much to say about it because it's not funny. Like, I wanted this to be funny. I actually have this comic book because I will buy any random weird thing that involves the X-Men.
Oh, yes. No, also, I just haven't had the privilege of running across it in a long box. I would have bought it in a heartbeat, Adam. No question about that.
And I don't want to make it seem like there's no funny things in this, because like I do appreciate the fact that the Cyclops character, Psych Major, his only thing is he just cries all the time. And he cries so much that he like floods floors and drowns Magneto at a certain point.
But
and like
that's also like the first joke. That's the joke that you
that's
make.
why I feel like my 10, 11-year-old self like is the author behind this comic book. You know, it feels like a child came up with this, and then Marvel was just like, sure, we got to keep putting out Alf comics, like let's do it, go for it, you know.
This does have a funny joke. The one funny joke that I found out retroactively is when at the end of the comic, by the way, all the uncanned X-Melmen, Melmac blows up.
Yes.
So they're presumed dead, but Alf says, they'll probably come back. But Alf says that he can't die on this planet. He's got at least 6 issues more story to do. And the comic ends in 6 issues, which is apparently Michael Gallagher was very upset that they were canceling Alf. And the rest of the run is him being mad at Marvel about canceling Alf. Now, have I read anything that Michael Gallagher has done? No, I did not read his Guardians of the Galaxy run in the 90s. Beyond that, it's Alf and Count Duckula.
Oh, Count Duckula.
And Care Bears.
A lot of Star Comics, it sounds like.
Fur, apparently.
I am also just baffled, like, because this comic is clearly geared towards kids, right? Like, it's not drawn in a style that emulates the sitcom. It's drawn in a style that emulates the animated Alf cartoon that was based on the sitcom. And so this is clearly marketed for children, but like, I wonder, like, if you were a kid reading this, would any of the jokes land? I don't think they would.
I don't think anything lands in this comic. So I don't know what I expected.
Well, this does beg the question, is this better or worse than X-Men Gold number 9 at 868?
Worse, because it's also not trying to do something.
Yeah.
It like also has zero ambition, and it fails at the one thing it's supposed to do, which is a joke. Also, it made me mad.
Okay. Well, that usually pushes things much lower when things make you mad. So is this better or worse than X-Men Liberators at 915, Zach?
I mean, what do you think? X-Men Liberators is better than this. X-Men Liberators is a nothing comic.
Yeah. I think that's probably better.
Like, I'm looking at this. X-Men Black Sun is better than this.
Yep.
Mojo Worldwide, a bad X-Men parody comic, is better than this.
Is this better or worse than Wild Thing number 4 at 954, Zach? Like, I don't think this is as bad as like Mutant X Origins number 1 at 955, a show that I have now watched 4 episodes of.
I am so excited about that. Adam texted me to tell Anna, to try and argue with Anna about how she should watch the TV show Legion because it was good. And I did. And then I said, but you're an adult. Do what you want. I really don't care. I'm not getting in the middle of this. And Anna said that she was forcing Adam to watch Mutant X. And I said, that sucks for Adam. Yeah, that's bad.
It's actually pretty funny. It's a very stupid show. All right, wait, but you didn't tell me. Is this better or worse than that?
It's better than Wild Thing 4, worse than Venom Tooth and Claw number 3.
All right, that's going to make
Venom Tooth and Claw number 3 does something, and that something is tell me how Dirt Nap came to be.
So this is our new 954 Alf number 44, Alf's Excellent Adventure. So the one thing that I'm not sure, if you're not like a listener that started with the podcast, you may not realize the age discrepancy between Zach and I. So while Zach was
We were strangers who met on the internet.
Yeah. While Zach was brought into this good earth in the lovely year of 1991, we had to go back to the halcyon days of 1980 to find my comic book. And this was a struggle because my birthday, we've covered every X-Men comic that came out in 1980 because there weren't that many.
They were making like one book. It was
Yeah.
very easy.
Yeah. So, we did decide
Also, it was the best. It was like the best year for that one book. So we've talked about it
at length. So we went with a comic that has a release date of December 1980, a couple months off from my actual birthday, but is very indicative of the times. This is Dazzler Volume 1, Number 1.
This is written by Tom DeFalco. It's got pencils by John Romita Jr.
But it's weird. The wiki claims that Buscema and John Romita also contributed, as well as inks by Alfredo Alcala, Bob McLeod, and John Romita, colors by Glynis Wine. So I don't know, but John Romita Jr. is the only credited artist in the comic.
And let's start with the good part. It's early John Romita Jr.
It is,
but still John Romita Jr. It's still 1980 John Romita Jr. Like, looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's definitely like 80s house style for sure. And
if there was anyone who was born to do Marvel House style,
it was John Romita Jr. That's
grew
for
up
sure.
in the house.
Yeah.
The house that they styled it after.
Yeah. So Dazzler number 1, I would like to be able to say, is a bold number 1 where a female character gets to fight off a bunch of people that are running after her into an alley. And it's really giving the character a lot of agency. But unfortunately, Spider-Man immediately shows up and saves the day for her, despite her like having the advantage on these guys with her light powers. So we're off to a very strange start in this book because this is a
Really
Dazzler
bad
comic,
start.
but if you look at the cover features Dazzler in the middle, but also Spider-Man, Iron Man, Nightcrawler, and Enchantress. And that's pretty good advertising because this is a Dazzler book that showcases like the X-Men, the Avengers, Spider-Man, Asgard stuff. And like, it's like, we're going to ease you into the world of Dazzler via the rest of the Marvel universe. Would you say that's fair?
I think it is. But I think what's important is to make sure, for folks who don't know, the history of Dazzler. Dazzler was very literally created by committee to be a multimedia sensation in movies, music, and comics. That's what their plan was. And they built it around disco. And they built this plan in 1979. Adam?
Yo.
I know you weren't alive for the dawn of disco, but Saturday Night Fever is 1977.
Yes.
The disco demolition night at the White Sox Stadium.
Yep.
That's long past. That's in 79. So that's that year.
Yeah, in a lot of ways,
Disco's dead.
Had kind of died and started permutating into other things, and yet...
And we can talk about all the deeper cultural significances around disco, but like, the reality is, disco was not the zeitgeist.
It was not the going
1980.
concern in a way that putting a character out like this would make like the most sense, right? Like, if you were really... at the moment, maybe this character would be more of a new wave character, right? But it's a disco character coming out at this time. And, oddly enough, I think that in the broad strokes of the history of this character does actually work in the character's favor. because Dazzler is always kind of like a step behind, a step out of place. Obviously an extremely talented singer, but is like always a little bit down on her luck. She is very much a Spider-Man character in that, a Peter Parker character, if you will, in that regard.
In this comic, and actually through anything Dazzler does into the 90s, I agree.
Mhm.
However, because Marvel has become culture, like it just is. Marvel people are like, oh yeah, who's that singing superhero? Dazzler. So now they make it so that Dazzler was this big star and like the Madonna of her day, which is not the case if you've read Dazzler comics, and it's weird and I don't like it, but I have to be the one who's in the wrong here.
It's interesting.
Like that's just,
I mean, yeah,
the world's moved past that.
There have been some, sort of different takes on what Dazzler's success level was at these different points, right? Like really she should be kind of like a D-lister, not this like world famous character. So Dazzler at this point is just trying to get gigs, and really the only thing that happens in this issue is basically at the end when Enchantress for some reason is coming down to earth and they have a sing off, and
Midgard.
Excuse me, yes, Midgard. And Dazzler wins. And Enchantress is pissed and knocks a hole through a wall. But along the way, she is calling the X-Mansion, which is sort of foreshadowing that Warren Worthington is going to be part of these stories. So we get a whole Danger Room sequence. We get a whole sequence with the Avengers Mansion and Beast bouncing around, foreshadowing maybe some of those relationships that'll come back later in Dazzler and Beast's life. So it's just an opportunity to really center Dazzler as a member of the larger Marvel universe, not just a character who appeared in the pages of X-Men.
And in that respect, it sort of, I mean, I guess it ends up working, but I feel like if Chris Claremont doesn't immediately rescue Dazzler, or if Dazzler doesn't first appear in the Dark Phoenix saga, we don't talk about Dazzler anymore. Like she happens to appear at the best moment you could ever appear, to just like always be around forever now.
Yeah, it's interesting because Dazzler is a really fun character design, and eventually I think you and I have read enough Dazzler for this show that we found some things that we really like about this book. This particular issue, we're not there yet. This is not
It's bad.
It's just like intro, Dazzler 101. We're just trying to drop who her family characters are that are going to be involved in this. We get a little bit of her backstory about how, she went to law school, but she just really wants to be a singer, and her dad.
Hey, I'm going to be honest. If I'm her dad and my daughter has just gotten valedictorian in pre-law and says, but daddy, I want to sing, I am going to be upset. He's a jerk about it and he acts wrong.
Yeah.
But there's a version of this response where it's like, you're 22 years old. You don't, you're so smart. You're not going to be pretty forever. Like, being a pop star, you can just go be a lawyer and be happy and have money, Allie.
Listen,
she has to follow her dream.
He wasn't supportive of her dreams growing up, and he holds a vendetta against her for what happened with his mother, as with her mother, as we know. So yes, there's a larger context to this, and you got to support your kids' dreams.
There is. We don't get it in this comic, but there is a larger context to it.
There is. We will find. Well, if you've listened to this show, you already know about it. This is just okay. It's certainly not terrible, but it's just like run-of-the-mill intro stuff. So unfortunately, it does not have a lot of dazzle for Dazzler #1, but it's certainly not as bad as the Dazzler graphic novel, which is really bad.
The Dazzler graphic novel does not grasp what it reaches for, even by a little bit. But like, eventually Dazzler becomes a fun book.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not my favorite book in the world, and if I've said that I've read all of it, I'm lying. But like, by the time Ken shows up, her her lawyer boyfriend who she cheats on with Angel.
Mm,
By the time Ken shows up, I'm all in.
yeah.
Like, I want more Dazzler in concept there, but here it's so much of a nothing comic, but it is drawn by John Romita Jr.
Yeah. So we do have some Dazzler down in the 600s, like high 700s. The last one we've talked about on the show is at 699, which is Dazzler Plays Carnegie Hall, which is a much better issue than this.
Carnegie Hall's better than that. Yep.
Yeah, at 702 we have Dazzler 38, which is the time she fights the X-Men. I would say that's still better than this, but this is definitely better than at 962 we have Dazzler the movie.
This is true. Is it better? I'm going to put it below the A-Force arc about Dazzler Thor.
Yeah.
Which is a weird artifact, but does have some cool designs and art in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Just working my way down on the list.
This is better than Spider-Man Team Up #1. That's at 751.
Okay. I'm fine with that. What is Marvel Unlimited number 19?
I don't know, but we don't even have to look it up because above this is at 746 is The Search for Cyclops. This is better than The Search for Cyclops.
I would agree. This is probably better than...
Is it better than Gambit from the Marvel Vault that we just recently talked about?
I think it is, but I don't think it's better than the War of the Realms issue of Champions Volume 3 at 740.
Then let's put it below that, above Exiles 8 to 10, which I think they do a Coliseum fight. Don't ask me to know about Exiles. I won't.
All right,
We've
Zach.
already talked about all the Exiles that I ever want to talk about, and that's when Beak uses the power of friendship.
Yeah, that's the one. So our new 741 from 1980, Dazzler, #1. We've tripped through time. We have 1,002 stories on this list. This is crazy, Zach. What are we doing?
I mean, we're just having a swell time with good buds.
We are.
Good beers, good buds, good friends, all that stuff. And I'm always excited to do this podcast with you, even if it means that I have to talk about truly atrocious comics.
We chose them. It's our fault.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
But if you want it, listeners, if you want to choose what we talk about in future episodes, be sure to head over to patreon.com/battletheatom. $5 get your own bespoke episode. You can always follow on social, Adam Rec on Blue Sky and Instagram. And Zach, what are we doing next week?
That's a great question. It's an Excalibur thing.
Ooh.
Oh, Warwolves. We're doing Warwolves. And perhaps some of the guests from this episode will make a more long-standing appearance to keep up with their brand.
I think that might happen. Yeah.
That might happen, and I can't wait for it. But until then, folks, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!